But right now, in our series of having Democratic state reps from very red states to share the insanity of the legislation they're passing in these states or introducing, we now have on the Idaho Democratic State Chair and a representative in the Idaho State Legislature, Lauren Necochea, who represents District 19. Representative Necochea, how am I doing? Is that
pretty good? Yeah.
Pretty good?
Yeah.
Is that, what would be the right way? Like, my name's Obeidallah, so people say everything. I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, if they get it with an O, I'm like, I feel pretty good. You got the O part. What more can I do?
Obeidallah. It's at Necochea, just like a
Necochea.
Yeah.
Well, so you're I want first, because Idaho is like some exotic faraway place that most Americans never go to. I've been there once. I spoke at Boise State years ago. And so I was there, and it was really nice. People were very nice. Of course, it's a state of about 1.9 million people, very red right now. We know that Trump won by 64%. A Democrat has not won governor since 1995. Tell us a little bit about Idaho, the state, the people, and why is it so red?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't always this way. I grew up here, and I can remember when I was 10 years old, we had a state senate that was split 50-50, and we had a Democratic governor and a Republican lieutenant governor, and a healthy balance. And then I think what happened in Idaho is similar to the story in a lot of rural states where unions got crippled, and that force kind of went away, and it got redder and redder and redder. What we've seen in the last few years, though, is just massive conservative migration. Conservatives and
Oh,
ultra conservatives are migrating to Idaho because they see it as fertile ground for kind of their far right vision, and it's really changing the state. And not only are we becoming redder, but it's a different kind of red. The extremism is on the rise.
that's interesting. Isn't there parts of Idaho that want to secede? Or no, Washington State that wants to come to Idaho? Is that correct? They
Yeah,
want to secede?
yes,
I think
the
Texas is
eastern.
about to secede, by the way. I don't know if you saw it today, Greg Abbott's like that Joe
Oh,
Biden's broken the compact with Texas. I'm like, I think I saw that language in the secession
yeah,
resolutions of certain Confederate states, but
sounds like
for
yes,
them, it's just all
history
games.
repeating itself. There is this faction of Eastern Washington that wants to join with Idaho, which would be the worst possible thing because we don't need Idaho to get any redder. Our small little caucus just helps government function by making sure basic agency budgets pass. And if we were overpowered even more, I think it would be pretty devastating.
That's unbelievable. It's very interesting to say that you're saying that change in the state is not through, say, gerrymandering or something like that. It's the migration of people to your state from other states, maybe California or other states, who are really right wingers and saw an opportunity. And, I've had some people on from Florida, Democrats, who've said that we didn't get it, that what was going on with DeSantis and other Republican governors was the encouraging of people who were like former police officers and fire department, especially police officers, to move down to Florida, and they were doing a migration as well, attracting people to come down there.
Yeah, that's a very similar pattern to what we're seeing here. They're coming largely from California, also some from Oregon and Washington and other states.
Wow. Unbelievable. We're really going to be little countries after it all. We're going to be like an EU where Idaho is its own sovereign state, which I'm sure you have issues with sovereigns. When I went to Idaho, I remember they told me in the north, there were some of the people who were either sovereign citizens or avid white supremacists up there. And it was kind of
Yes.
down where we were by Boise was really nice, rather diverse, and pluralistic society.
Yeah, it's night and day. We have a really troubling history in North Idaho with an Aryan Nations
Yep.
settlement, and that we kind of worked past that, but there's a reincarnation of that effort that's really ugly.
So let's talk about legislation that's passed. A lot of what Idaho's been getting pressed for is the anti-freedom laws, the ones to force women against their will to carry a fetus to term. The Supreme Court considering one of the cases earlier, just a few weeks ago. So tell us, first of all, look, there are so many laws now passed by Republicans that they overlap. I don't even know what the law is in certain. Texas has numerous laws banning abortion, and you have to get to what is the real one that's in place? So I know you have the Defense of Life Act. That was the one before, which is Defense of Life. It's really the Prosecution and Oppression of Women Act. Tell us, though, about what is the law now in your state in terms of abortion freedom?
Yeah, so we also have layers because they were trying to do a copycat law to Texas, where the kind of the bounty style law before Roe v. Wade fell, and then we also had our trigger law. So not only can a doctor go to prison and have their medical license revoked over an abortion, but then they can be sued by the rapist's family members because that we still have that bounty law on the books. It's a tangled mess. We have a lot of lawsuits in play, and so it's hard for me to know on any day where the injunctions are, what's being appealed is it's very scary. And they don't stop. The Republicans,
Right.
you think they got everything they wanted. You have to, even if the fetus has a lethal anomaly, you have to carry that pregnancy to term. We have in theory a rape and incest exception, but you have to go get your abortion uh, permission slip from the police, and the police aren't really set up to do that. And we know so many of these rapes are not reported to the police. So we don't really have a workable exception there. So you think they would have everything they want, but they keep going. And a cynic might say you can't fundraise off of last year's abortion bill, and so that's why they keep churning these things out. But it is startling, and so we have we do it's not enforceable right now, but we have on the books that you can't help a teenager get across state lines to get an abortion. That's a crime, and it's very ambiguous. I asked the bill sponsor, okay, if a 17-year-old approaches me for help, what can I give him a phone? What help would I give? Could I
Mm-hmm.
legally provide? If they were asking me, how can I access an abortion? And she refused to answer my question. That's tied up in the court right now. I think what is very scary is what the U.S. Supreme Court just did in terms of making it enforceable. Our prohibition that we had a reprieve from a court that said medical abortions that are I'm sorry, abortions during medical emergencies when someone comes through the ER, and TALA applies, that federal law that Ronald Reagan signed into law, means that doctors have to be able to stabilize that patient, because the exception we have on the books is just around preventing certain death, and so any doctor is going to be
Right.
scared calling lawyers and saying, will this stand up in court as preventing death? They have an infection but they aren't septic yet, or do I need to wait until the patient gets septic and is on death's door and then intervene? So the law was terrible, and the court ruling that came about thanks to the U.S. Department of Justice saying that you have to stabilize these patients in medical emergencies was really, I thought, a gift to the Republican lawmakers who enacted this, because they can kind of get, oh, phew, like
Right.
women won't be harmed. We can just leave this as it is and say, see, no harm here. And that's not the route they took. They immediately decided to appeal the ruling. The legislature added more their own lawyers to this appeal, and then we have an activist AG appealing it. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court decided that in the meantime, until they can hear it, which is a terrible omen, this law is now enforceable, and doctors are leaving our state, and it's a real. We've had two um, two centers that provide obstetric care close. And then I've heard rumblings of a third one that's about to close because they can't get the providers to provide care. And this is in a large rural state where we already are on the bottom of the list all the time for the number of physicians we have per capita.
So help us understand this, because the idea of killing women doesn't seem to be good public policy. But we've seen Republicans in Texas have no problem with women dying, or at least suffering grotesquely, and to the doorstep of death, and then have to plead for their life, like someone who's committed some horrific crime, but their only crime is being a woman who's having a pregnancy that's a threat to their life. Help us understand what is going on, because I live in New York City. I'm from New Jersey. We don't have these barbaric laws.
Yeah.
What is the motivation here?
I'm having a hard time understanding it, and I don't think Idaho voters understand it. We just saw some more polling that Boise State University put out on Friday that shows that a majority of Idahoans do not want these extreme bans, but it is in the DNA of the Idaho Republican Party that has become more and more extreme. with the conservative migration we're having, with the closed primaries, and where unfortunately Democrats just aren't competitive in a lot of the districts. And so legislators are always looking over their shoulder to the right to see if they're going to get challenged from the right and not to the left. The Idaho Republican Party has in its platform that is abortion is murder in all cases. They put this in there. And then last year there was a motion at their meeting to create an exception to protect the life of the mother. This exception went down in like a 2-to-1 vote of the people who are running the Idaho Republican Party. 2-to-1 think that you should just let the woman die.
And I tell you why? Because I've seen some Republicans say it's the will of God, and God will decide.
That must be part of it, because it makes no logical sense. It must be coming from faith or something. But that a living, breathing woman takes precedence. That we would just let her die, knowing full well that the fetus is not going to survive either. It's hard to stomach.
So when you're in Idaho, I'm sure Republicans speak freely about their views. Do they invoke that this is based on their religious beliefs, their pro-life religious beliefs, or how do they justify public policy in terms of banning abortion?
I've heard them say that they just must care more about babies than we do. There's an effort by a legislator that got a little tripped up, but the bill will be coming back to replace the term embryo and fetus throughout Idaho statute with the term unborn child or preborn child. Mm-hmm. And it's held up as if this is just, an exercise in, English. It's, just about, neutral nomenclature or something. And of course, that's not what's going on. And this threatens IVF, it threatens access to contraception, different types of contraception. And it tries to put, an embryo or a fetus on the same, legal footing as the woman, as the patient.
They have no problem with that. I mean, at 6 weeks, an embryo is a clump of cells the size of a grain of rice. But to them, that grain of rice is more important than a fully developed woman. And it says so much about their view of the world. And I'm chatting with the Idaho Democratic State Chair and a Democrat representative in the State Assembly, Lauren Necochea. How close?
It's just that for Necochea.
Necochea. Damn it. Necochea. All right. I'm putting this right here. There are no words for what's going on in this country. I cannot believe that we've gotten this backwards, that if you were a woman in 1973, when Roe was decided, you had more fundamental rights than you do in 2024. And the Republicans are crawling over each other to enact even more oppressive laws. And you mentioned birth control. Is it clear that their next goal is to ban certain forms of birth control that don't comport with their own religious beliefs about what women should be doing with their lives?
We'll see. I think they do realize that that might be a bridge too far. And it boggles my mind, because Idaho does have this, independent streak in us, and we want, to be able to make our own decisions. And that's also part of our DNA. And I do think some of my Republican colleagues probably realize, oh, wait, my wife uses an IUD.
Right.
And so I haven't seen that yet. There is an organization, advocacy, I don't know what you call this organization, that has an explicit mission to promote what they see as Bible-based public policy and to write the Bible into statute. And that group is talking about trying to ban certain types of contraception, but I don't know how far they'll get.
Well, I mean, in a very red state, I imagine, and it passes in one red state and it just passes all over, this cookie cutter craziness, we shall call it. And
like we're
so I also saw an interesting thing that in Idaho, you had a state maternal mortality review committee, and it expired. And it said that the data showed an increase in deaths among pregnant women and new mothers, and that there's at least one Republican introduced legislation to create a new maternal mortality review committee. Why would they ever let this expire? Why wouldn't they want to know if women are dying during pregnancy?
Yeah, well, it expired just as their abortion bans were coming into effect. And I mean, you have to look at it and think, why now do they want to cover this stuff up? Why now do they want to block, the transparent review of maternal deaths? And I think it is to cover up the harm that they're doing and so that it doesn't see the light of day. Now I think they've gotten a lot of flack, and so they're going to try to clean up their mess. And so we saw one bill that's trying to move it to the Board of Medicine, which could have some problems, and that's not kind of typically within their role. It's our Department of Health and Welfare that does that sort of work. And so there is now a competing bill that would just put it back where it was and go back to the old process. But this was really valuable data. Maternal deaths are harrowing and awful to think about. And of course, we should study them. And one of the key recommendations that came out of our review committee before it was disbanded was that the deaths they saw were preventable, and that keeping moms on coverage would prevent a lot of those. And you think about all the things that happened in that year, postpartum depression, just a lot of stress. And we only cover moms who are in Medicaid up until 6 months after birth, if they're eligible based on their pregnancy. And so, one of the key recommendations was to extend that to 12 months, which was another bill that died last year. That's coming back, and so we'll see how that plays out. But it's just the hits keep coming for moms and just anyone of childbearing age.
If we were talking about another country, it would be one thing. We're talking about the United States of America, and this is happening.
Yeah.
It was a third world country that didn't have the funding to do it. They have the funding. They've made a choice. They've made a values choice that women are going to die, and we don't want to have any record of it because it's an inconvenient truth to tell people that our laws are actually killing women.
Yeah.
But Democrats are baby killers because we believe women should have reproductive freedom. Remarkable. So something else I saw in Idaho, and I saw an article. I was reading a lot of the IdahoCapitalSun.com and the Idaho Statesman. Now, librarians in your state apparently are contemplating leaving work at big numbers. The Idaho Library Association says 60% of respondents are considering leaving the profession because of book bans, antagonism, and threats. What can you share about what's going on in terms of Idaho and with book bans?
Yeah, so it's been pretty awful. It started a couple years ago. The first iteration, the first bill to attack libraries and librarians actually wanted to add librarians to statute around the criminalizing pedophilia. And so they were going to jail librarians for up to 6 months if they provided any sort of objectionable materials to kids, anything that's found to be obscene. And the problems are, the definitional problems are severe because we still have it in our law where obscenity includes just homosexuality as it is, not a sexual act, but you have two gay characters, and now that's obscene and harmful to children. So it's troubling on so many levels. One, that you would jail a librarian over just helping a child find a book on a shelf, and that bill flew through the House of Representatives, but did not get a hearing in the Senate. But then last year, this concept came back, and the bill actually passed both chambers. And it was the idea was to drown libraries in lawsuits so that people could just have a private cause of action. They see a material in the library, and they get offended, and then they can sue for these guaranteed cash rewards. And the idea was to intimidate and scare libraries into, hiding or just getting rid of anything that has LGBTQ characters or anything that has any sort of sexual content. We see in these hearings the books that the kind of Moms for Liberty types bring, all the people who are attacking libraries. And one of the books was a sex ed book that I had on my kid's shelf at home. It was just factual information about human sexuality. This is something we need to teach our kids. But they'll hold up a book that has two gay characters, that hold hands. And so but we would have been, with this bill last year, we would have been at the mercy of these people who have, their very narrow views, and they want everyone else to abide by them. They want to spoil the party for everybody else. If I don't want to read this book, then nobody else can. and I'm going to sue these libraries into oblivion. And we have some libraries in Idaho. These small rural libraries might have a annual budget of $60,000 a year, and just one big room. And so you get one of these lawsuits, and they can't even hire their part-time librarian anymore. That bill was vetoed by the governor, and then we were able to sustain the veto by one vote, which also goes to show why it does. Democrats do matter, even in these red states where we're underdogs and we're outnumbered. We were able to uphold that veto. So now we have the third iteration coming along, and the original bill was pulled. It's being reworked. We'll see what comes out of it. But this constant terrorizing of librarians is happening at the legislative level. It's happening at the local level, where people are just coming in with these lists and harassing librarians. We've seen some library districts, but also school boards outright ban books. And it's a threatening. It's not a happy time to be being a librarian, to be a librarian who are tasked with such an important role.
Sure. It doesn't seem we're that far from book burning. I mean, I imagine that might be on the list coming down next.
There was a version of a bill last year, not the bill that got enacted, but it called for destroying books who didn't mean these
by a big fire. Bonfire, like History Channel, come to life. That would be really nice. Remarkable stuff. This is Idaho, folks. We're talking about Idaho. We're talking one of the few Democratic state representatives in the state of Idaho who's the Democratic state chair. What about gender affirming care? What horrific stuff has Idaho done on that?
So this has been just very, very heartbreaking. The harm that we're causing and the stress for families of kids who are transgender. And the bill that was enacted last year to totally criminalize doctors for providing gender affirming care. The talk was all about surgeries. We don't have any surgeries happening in Idaho. They just don't happen in Idaho. But the bill also blocked all the forms of gender affirming care, puberty blockers, and hormone treatments. And the bill was set to take effect on January 1st. And luckily, we have the reprieve of an injunction, so it's not enforceable and it'll work its way through the courts. But this has caused, families to leave the state, to flee the state. It's making it harder for us to recruit doctors and pediatricians how can you, when you're a pediatrician or an endocrinologist and you know what these kids need, the gender affirming care they need, that's proven to reduce suicidal ideation, proven to reduce anxiety, proven to reduce depression. And you can't help these kids because you're going to go to prison if you do. And so it's just another way we're driving doctors out of our state.
And that's not good for anyone. That's not good for the people on the right or the left, less doctors. But
it's not good if you have diabetes. It's not good if you have a healthy, normal pregnancy.
Right. And I did see that in the new session, one of the Republican legislators introduced a bill that would permanently repeal Medicaid expansion unless certain conditions are fulfilled. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but it says a lot that they want to get rid of a safety net for people who are the most in need. Where is that going?
Yeah, so we'll see. I think it will. I think we'll be able to stop it because of Democrats. I think a majority of Republicans would do it. The Republicans are still bitter about how we got to Medicaid expansion. So they were just obstructionists for years. And then finally, a citizen-led, volunteer-led effort got Medicaid expansion on the ballot. And we passed it with 61% of the vote. And then some recent polling showed that I think it's close to 70, maybe 71% of voters. I mean, as we get even though we get redder and redder and redder, that's how many voters want us to keep Medicaid expansion. So it's very popular. People want Medicaid to be there for when people need it. But they are bitter that the citizens went around them, and so so they keep trying to make the ballot initiative process harder and harder, or virtually impossible. And they got a slap on the wrist from the Idaho Supreme Court in their efforts to do that. But they're also this comes up every year that we should repeal Medicaid expansion, even though the math pencils out very well for Idaho. Because for every dollar we put into Medicaid expansion, we draw down $9. And then we can use that money for things that we otherwise would have to pay 100% state money for. So, think about substance use disorder treatment for someone coming out of prison. we had inadequate funds, but we would try to fund that to keep people on the right track. And now we can use most of those people will qualify for Medicaid, so it's very cheap. And so every year we see that it will cost the state more money if we repeal Medicaid expansion, but they persist because of their ideological opposition to helping people.
Yeah, that's it. Unless it's people they think or fetuses they believe should be helped. Any other legislation that's in the new session that's been introduced that I may have missed that is raising alarm bells for you?
Oh, well, we know it's coming. A school voucher scheme that they want to run as a tax credit. And I think what's maybe unique about ours is that it applies to homeschoolers as well. So we would literally give people cash to take their kids out of school. And then we have zero standards around homeschooling. You don't have to teach your kid a darn thing. You
right.
can, let them watch TV
Fox News all day. Right.
They
watch Fox News. There's your
and just take the cash. And that's very disturbing. And we know some of the forces behind this, at least in Idaho, are on the record saying they don't believe we should have public schools at all. And that's really the end goal. If we could, pay people off with a fraction of the money that it costs to educate a child, maybe they'll accept the cash, and then wealthy people never have to pay taxes. Is I guess the end goal.
Why would you want kids to learn facts and critical thinking and everything when you just indoctrinate them and then they can continue to vote the way that they wanted to vote? It's remarkable. So is there any hope for Democrats to make more inroads? I know you're telling me it's a population migration situation, so it's different. But is there any hope in Boise or in some of the areas where there's more people that you could win some more elections?
We do have battleground districts. We have districts that are represented by a mix of Democrats and Republicans. So we're always working to make inroads. We're really in a period of rebuilding in the party, and that's been exciting. We, when I started, we had a ton of dark, what we call dark counties where if you wanted to run for office as a Democrat, there was nobody for you to call. There was no, county Democratic Party. We now have all of our parties organized. We are outraising the Idaho Republican Party, if you can believe it.
That's great.
It is great, and we have big plans. We have to work harder, and we have to get the word out. I think we have just a lot of cultural Republicans in our state, people who just automatically vote Republican. That's just what they do. And we know that when we can meet them at the door and have conversations with them, and they see where we stand, they see how well it aligns with them. Voters here overwhelmingly love Medicaid expansion. Republicans want to kill it, and Democrats want to have it. And that's just one of many policy areas where our values and what we're trying to do and our positions are aligned with what voters want. And Republicans are way out, and I guess we'd call it right field. But it does take the work of meeting people at the door and talking to them about what we believe.
We have to get more progressives to move to Idaho. We have some subsidy program.
Please. I mean, there are companies that market themselves, that market Idaho as, they market themselves to conservatives to get them to move here, to sell them real estate. And yes. And so we need the opposite. It's just
we do. I don't know what to do. Well, if someone lives in Idaho and they want to get involved in the Democratic Party, what do you recommend? Because we do have listeners from Idaho, I know.
So you can go to idahodems.org, and it's easy there to see who your county lead is. If you want to, you can become a precinct captain. You can volunteer. You can volunteer for campaigns or for your county party or for the state party. We're going to have a lot of work to do this year. And even if you live in an part of the state where you don't have a lot of local Dems on the ballot, we'll have virtual phone banks and things that you can do from anywhere. And just Idaho's not on a lot of people across the country don't wake up thinking about Idaho, and that's a problem because the people are really suffering, and the Republican legislators are inflicting a lot of harm and a lot of pain on the people of Idaho. And so we have to do so much better.
If you live in Idaho and you're listening and you believe in freedoms and academic freedom and reproductive freedom and a whole bunch of other freedoms and democracy, get involved. You can make a difference. Run for office. We need more people in Idaho. So Well, thank you, Representative. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And I wish you the best in being chair of the Democratic Party in Idaho, to continue to rebuild that. And we'll continue the conversation, maybe check in later in the year as we get closer to election day and see what's going on in Idaho.
I would love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate
Thank you.
this.